my pleasure to introduce to you Brendan Mahan. So Brendan is the host of ADHD Essentials podcast and an internationally known expert on ADHD, executive functioning, and parenting. He helps people manage the emotional, academic, and lifestyle impacts ADHD has on people who have it and those who care about them. He has been a featured presenter before the Massachusetts School Counseling Association and the Massachusetts School Administrators Association, and he'll be presenting his Wall of Awful model at the International Conference on ADHD in November. Even more important than all of that, though, he's a graduate of Chelmsford High School, 1995 class, so go Lions. And it's my pleasure to now introduce to you Brendan Mahan.
So today's program is different than the last 2 or 3 times. I forget how many times I've been here. Let's go with 3 because it sounds better than the last 2 or 3 times that I've been here, because it's a Q&A. So I have nothing prepared. Kind of, sort of. Like, I have stuff prepared. But I can fake it if I need to, because that is a thing. But it's really about you and your concerns and your questions and the stuff that you want to know. So if you want, we can start with questions. If you want me to soft shoe for a little while and get your brain flowing and your blood going, I can do that too. Anybody have anything burning that they want to know? No. Man, you all saw the sign that said Q&A, right? I'm kidding. There are jokes. It's a thing that happens. It's a Q&A. Yeah. So I'll start with a little bit about basic ADHD stuff, I guess, and we'll see where it goes. Is that okay? And feel free to ask questions. You're totally allowed. So I'll start off. We'll just do a little bit of an overview. First off, ADHD is horribly named. It's like the worst name in the whole wide world, because ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Here's the thing. It's not a deficit of attention. And it's not only about attention, and a third-ish of people with ADHD don't have hyperactivity. So, yay? But it's a disorder, so we get that part right. It does, in fact, make things more difficult. I like to think of ADHD as life on hard mode. If you think like video games, you're the only one who knows what hard mode means, but that's okay. So in video games, you can pick how hard you want the game to be. With ADHD, everything is harder. It just is. And depending on what questions you ask, we'll either go there or we'll go somewhere else entirely. It's up to you. But the way ADHD works is primarily around executive functioning, which is sort of the organizational side of the brain. That word executive is on purpose, right? The business executives are responsible for keeping things organized and running smoothly and knowing how much time we have before the product launch and all that stuff. We are awful at all that stuff, which doesn't mean that there aren't executives with ADHD, because there completely are, and we can overcome those challenges. But it's hard. We struggle with that. And in terms of the deficit concept around attention, it's not a deficit. It's an inability to regulate our attention, which is different. It can look similar, but it's different. Because if you and I are talking, right, and I'm going, huh? Oh, yeah. It seems maybe like I don't have any attention, right? Like my attention is terrible. But that's not what's going on. I'm just not paying attention to you, right? I'm paying attention to this nonsense thing right here, this monstrosity. I'm not regulating my attention, because what I should be doing is saying, oh yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing that you were able to do that. I'm really impressed by that. Or I did something similar, or whatever is appropriate in the conversation. But instead I'm getting pulled into my phone. And with ADHD people, that's all the time. And some of you are like, I get sucked into my phone. Does that mean I have ADHD? No, it's not what it means. I mean, maybe you do. I don't know. You might be here because you have it. But being pulled into your phone doesn't automatically mean you have ADHD. It just means that phones are designed to grab our attention and drag it into them. Everything in the modern world is trying to get our attention and take our attention away from where we want to put it. It's sort of the existential challenge of the internet age, and especially the smartphone age. So if neurotypical people, which is those who don't have ADHD or other stuff too, if they're struggling with putting their attention where it needs to be, how many of you can feel the pull of your phones just from seeing mine? Anybody want to be honest right now? Yeah, right? Some of you are just laughing. You're like, I'm not going to raise my hand, but yes. If people who are neurotypical are struggling with that, imagine what it's like for folks with ADHD. I often equate ADHD to asthma because every one of us has gone for a run and been winded. Every one of us has been in an exceptionally smoky room or at a fire in someone's backyard and I can't breathe, right? Because the air is terrible or I've run a lot. But we don't automatically go, oh, well, I've been winded one time, I must have asthma. But we completely do that with ADHD. I've been distracted, does that mean I have ADHD? Or we go the other way. I get distracted sometimes, but I suck it up and deal. So how come people with ADHD can't just suck it up and deal, right? How come people with asthma can't just suck it up and deal? Because they can't. I know, because I have it. Right? It's just not going to happen. It's not how it works. And ADHD is the same way. We have enough research into ADHD to know that it's real, to know what the markers are for it. Is our understanding of it perfect? No. Our understanding of most things isn't perfect. My guess is that ADHD is going to eventually be sort of termed almost become an umbrella term. That's my guess as to what's going to happen with ADHD. Eventually, we're going to be able to delineate between types of ADHD enough to say there's this kind, and there's this kind, and there's this kind, and there's this kind. But we're not there yet. Right now, we have three kinds. Primarily hyperactive, primarily inattentive, and combined. Right? Hyperactivity, the kid who can't sit still. Inattentive, the kid who's out to lunch. Combined, the kid who walks into walls. Right? Out to lunch, still moving. Ouch! No, all of my jokes come from a place of love, guys. None of this is me being mean. Like, y'all are my brethren. It's the tribe. So that's ADHD, is this constant struggle. And one of the biggest challenges around it is that we moralize it so much. We put so much morality into it that we don't do with asthma, right? If I have an asthma attack up here, like she's trying to do, would this be helpful for you? If I have an asthma attack up here, you guys are not going to go, man, he just can't be bothered breathing. Like, why is he so lazy that he can't even breathe? Look at that loser. No one's going to do that to me. But if I forget to take the trash out, or lose my job due to inattentiveness, or because I'm late a lot, or if I double book events on the weekend or during the week, or if I forget your birthday, completely I am going to get moral judgment about that, which is ridiculous, because that's not why. I didn't forget your birthday because I don't love you. I talk to you every day. Oh my God, relax. I forgot your birthday because I have ADHD and sometimes I forget stuff. That's why I forgot your birthday. Does that make sense? And we don't talk about ADHD like that. Oftentimes we don't even point out the fact that it gets moralized so much, but it does. It gets moralized all the time. Oh my God, stop it. But we can moralize it because we don't understand it, because we don't really get what's going on with it. And it's easier to be like, that kid's just lazy, or that guy is just lazy, or that woman's just lazy. I don't believe in lazy. I don't think it's a thing. To me, lazy is learned helplessness that is an outgrowth of a lack of skills. If I don't have the skills to understand how to do the thing that you want me to do, and no one is giving me those skills, or even worse, I'm being judged for my lack of skills and found wanting, I'm going to stop doing that thing. I'm going to stop trying to figure it out. Because every time I try to figure it out and fail, I get punished for it. How come you can't just do the laundry? I can't believe you turned my shirts red again. How many white t-shirts do I have to have turned pink because you don't know how to do the laundry? Dad, how about you teach me how to do the laundry? Like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 times. until I know how to do the laundry. You telling me twice how to do the laundry over a span of 4 years does not equate to you teaching me how to do the laundry, because I didn't learn it. You haven't taught diddly until I've learned whatever it is that you want me to learn. Is this making sense? And ADHD folks, we struggle with learning things. It's hard. We got to learn it over and over and over and over again. And then finally we're like, oh. Did anybody catch that I said we? Because I have it. I totally have ADHD. That is a thing. I know what it's like because I've looked out of ADHD eyes for the past 41 years. I went to Westlands, I went to McCarthy, I went to CHS as a kid with ADHD. Unfortunately, I did that in the late 80s, early to mid 90s when ADHD was not a big deal, so I did not get diagnosed until, I don't know, like 8, 9 years ago. And when I got diagnosed, I really started figuring it out, and I became the person I needed, is really what happened. And so that's what I do professionally, is I work with adults and kids and families who are affected by ADHD, and I help them navigate the disorder. And I do workshops like this so that people can come and be like, I'm here for my kid. I swear, I don't have ADHD, because I don't want to out anybody. But that's what I do. That's my job. I have a podcast, like was mentioned, where I interview experts on ADHD and other stuff, parenting. I literally interviewed an expert on voice, on the use of the voice, because I was like, that's a parenting skill. If you can use your voice well, you can parent really effectively. So let's talk about that. But experts in areas that are useful for parenting and ADHD. Parents who are affected by ADHD, either because they have it or because their kids have it. And I interview school staff, because so much of a kid's day happens at school, and so many of us as parents don't know what that looks like. And I'm trying to open up doors and shine some light on that. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. That's twice exceptional.
Yeah.
So daughter, how old's your daughter?
She's 7.
7-year-old daughter. Ooh, okay. 7-year-old daughter has ADHD. 7 is 2nd grade. 7-year-old daughter, 2nd grade, twice exceptional, which means gifted and has something else. In this case, it's ADHD. The giftedness is overlapping the ADHD such that the daughter is making effective progress anyway, and school's like, nope, you don't need a 504, you don't need an IEP. Except if you have an ADHD diagnosis, then you are covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, so you get a 504, full stop. So pick that battle, and if you need an advocate, I can certainly point you to advocates. It's not something I do personally, because then I would never see my family. But I can point you to people. And that is a challenge in schools in general. With like, well, they're making academic progress, so it's not a deal, we don't need to worry about it. Except if you've got a diagnosis, you can at least get the 504. How far into the fight have you gone?
Well, she was only diagnosed with the end of last year, the end of the school year last year, but they're like not scheduling a 504 meeting for me. And I keep asking, and they keep saying they want the current teachers.
Write a letter. Write a letter, request testing.
Well, so
And then they have 30 days.
Their psych testing done.
Yeah, write a letter to the school requesting testing. And there's a formal way to do that I'm not going to do, I'll bore people. But there's a formal way to write a letter to say, I want my kid tested, I want my kid checked out for an IEP 504, and for special education services, and then they have 30 days. The end. That's the law. But when you're just like, hey, I'm a little concerned about my child, then it's not official, and they can be like, sorry, I think she's probably okay.
I have the paper. We had her evaluated by a private neuropsychologist because last year when I requested the evaluation, they told us there wasn't anything wrong with her, so they didn't recommend that we follow through the test.
Did you request formally? And they didn't do
The
it.
principal called me and convinced me that there wasn't anything wrong with my daughter, and that it was like, it'd be difficult for her to go through all the tests.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Formal request. I'm not getting any professional developments in Chelmsford now because I jumped from the jump. I'm like, fight the school! But sorry, principals. There's laws. But that's not okay. That's not what you do as a principal. A parent says, I think my kid might have a learning disability and I'm concerned about it. The principal goes, okay. That's how that works, because there's a law. But if they can make phone calls and sort of sneak around stuff, then you don't have a case and they will happily sneak around stuff. That's why the principal called you, and there wasn't an email from the principal or any sort of documentation. That's what's going on there. So you have to write, follow up after those phone calls. Just pursuant to our conversation regarding my child's special needs that we had on this date at this time, blah, 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 blah. And now there's a document. Now there's a trail. Sometimes you got to be really aggressive and kind of a jerk about it, but it's your kid. And that's the way it goes. I see people nodding, like either they've experienced this or they're special ed teachers, one or the other. But the frustration on the faces makes me think it's the parent and not the special ed teacher. And that's disappointing. Like, that's not how it's supposed to go. So, yeah, look up some understood is a good, rights law is another good place to look, and just get yourself a little more informed, because you don't want to pay me to do this for you, because you can research it in about the same amount of time it would take me to walk you through it, and that'll save you like $100, because that's how much I charge an hour, and I don't take insurance. But do that, and then move forward. Or listen to my podcast, because I totally interviewed an ADHD advocate, and in that episode, I'm not remembering off the top of my head what number it is, but if you listen to that episode, that's what it is. It's all, this is what you do, and here's how it works, and here's why schools are great, and here's why sometimes schools are frustrating, which is as much as I'm going to badmouth them, because I am totally in favor of teachers in schools. I'm a big fan, but sometimes they don't do it the right way, like anybody. Anybody else? Charleston. No, go ahead.
I have 9-year-old twin boys.
So do I. Up top.
I graduated in '94.
Oh, look at you. Are they identical?
No,
I win.
and they're not anything alike. One
Okay.
is kind of classic ADHD.
Mhm.
The other one is very much inattentive.
Okay.
And sort of got not really diagnosed for so long because of the lack of
inattentive
the
flies under the radar.
activity but
For those of you watching at home, we have twin 9-year-olds. They're not identical. Mine are identical. Hers are fraternal. One is primarily hyperactive, girl, boy.
both boys.
Both boys, so are mine. One is hyperactive, one's primarily inattentive. Inattentive has flown under the radar thus far. That's as far as I got. So,
Yeah, I'm struggling more in ways with how to handle the inattentive because he's, like you said, will walk into walk. You know, the functioning aspect is a real problem.
right.
And, you know, even a little scary as far as like, you know, I don't even trust him near a road because he'll just constantly
Mm-hmm.
just not there, spacey.
So inattentive kid is so spacey she doesn't even feel like she can trust him near a road. That's pretty significant. That's a lot of inattention. Is it literally playing out in terms of walking into roads, or are we mostly concerns around academics and that kind of stuff?
The school system's very good, and I did start medicating last year.
Cool.
I don't know, it's hard to tell because I'm not in school, like you said, I don't really know exactly
Right.
what's happening.
And medication tends to be more effective for hyperactivity than inattention, so that's a thing too.
Yeah, that's interesting, okay. Yeah, it's more just the everyday functions, you know, other than just repeating constantly all day long.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that I should be doing just to help with, I mean, I've tried to do charts.
Can you give me
an example.
a specific example?
Just, I mean, pretty much every morning whole process of getting to school.
So the entire morning routine is
Okay,
hard.
So he has to put homework in a folder,
Yep.
and then.
Let me stop you right there.
fourth grade
Hold
is
on.
more
Time out.
independent
Time out.
after-
Time out. This is for everybody in this room. Are you ready? Because I'm about to freak out on you. So much rage. There is no scenario where your kid should be putting papers into folders in the morning. That happens at night.
Oh, no.
There's no scenario where you're making lunch in the morning. There's no scenario where you're figuring out what you're going to wear in the morning. All of that stuff happens at night. Do as much of your morning routine as possible. In the evening routine, here's why. Your morning routine sets the tone for your day. If it's crammed with 107 things that you want to do, make the lunch, pick the clothes, get dressed, put the homework in the folder, put the folder in the backpack, all of that stuff, then you're fighting in the morning because there's too much to do. And then your kid goes to school agitated, and that agitation carries them through the day. And you go to work agitated, and that agitation carries you through the day. And I don't know about you, but work and school agitate me when I'm not agitated. So, you know what I'm saying? Like if I go there agitated, it's even worse. And then I come home and I'm more agitated. Not a plan. So I would rather have that battle at night. And it's not as big at night because there's a wider space of time to get all of that done. In the morning, let's be honest, an hour, maybe an hour and a half is how much time you have. And if you've got kids, they want to watch TV for like 45 minutes of that half an hour.
It's pretty much.
Right? So, but keep going.
Well, the problem, I'm just, as an example, he usually does do, everything's in the folder. But
Okay.
every day he comes home. And I pull out the homework and say, why didn't you give it to the teacher? I mean, just the same things
Yep.
every single day.
So you're taking the homework you're taking out the homework folder.
At the-
Last night's homework is still in that folder. Kid didn't turn in the homework.
I forgot. Every day, where's your water bottle? I forgot. Where's your jacket? I forgot.
Missing water bottles, missing jackets. So on homework, talk to the teacher. Because here's the deal. As a parent, I can't make my kid turn in their homework. I can't. And my kid is 9. And it's the teacher's job to be like, hey, where's your homework? Hey, kid, where's your homework? If my kid is consistently not turning their homework in, but that homework is consistently in the folder, the teacher is missing a step. Because only the teacher can build that skill. Only the teacher can teach that habit. I can't do that. Not from home, not from work. I mean, I could go to school and sit in on the teacher's classroom and be like, hey, do this now, right? But teachers don't like it when I do that because I charge money for it. So that's where you have to send an email to the teacher and say, my kid is consistently doing his homework. He's also consistently not turning it in. I need help. I need support in solving this problem because I can't make him turn it in. So what are some strategies? What is the homework system at school? Not what's the homework policy. Not like if you miss 3 of them, you get a detention. But what's the system?
And do it at the same time.
Right.
Or what, right.
And how can we problem solve this? How can we figure out a way to help my son remember to turn his homework in? Because this is absurd. And if the teacher's not supportive of you, then you start getting obnoxious. And you take a picture of your kid's homework and you email it to them every single night. Here's my kid's homework. Here you go. And they are not going to want to deal with that because that's ridiculous. And you don't want to deal with it either, but be ridiculous for a week or two, and then eventually that problem will get solved for you. But don't start there. Start with an email, a phone call, right? And every time you make a phone call, follow it up with an email, pursuant to our conversation over the phone. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Bullet pointing that phone conversation, and then moving on. Not because you're expecting the teacher to screw up, not because you want to have an adversarial relationship with that teacher, but because your kid is 9. And you might survive this, and it might be okay. And I'm assuming you don't have an IEP or a 504 yet, because this stuff would already be happening.
No, he's not. Well, he's
But-
on an IEP.
You get one or the other.
Yeah.
Is helping to turn in homework part of that IEP?
No.
Then it needs to be.
He claims he doesn't turn it in because he has to quickly rush to extra math help.
We need to get that in the homework. We need to get that in the IEP if your kid's got an IEP. But if your kid doesn't have an IEP, so sort of zooming out for a minute, if your kid doesn't have an IEP, the reason that you email after every phone call is because you're building a paper trail. So if one day you have to say, I want my kid tested, my kid needs a 504 and IEP, and they're like, no they don't, you go, boom! Here's 10 emails from kindergarten, 15 emails from first grade, 12 emails from third grade, 25 emails from fourth grade, because that's how fourth grade rolls. Fourth grade, everything gets harder. It kind of gets harder in third grade, and fourth grade's like a nightmare. And so you want to be able to have that historical documentation. Again, it's not a lack of trust around the teachers, because honestly, 10 times over the course of a school year, that's easy to not think of as a big deal. You know what I mean? You get like a week that's kind of rough and there's 3 there, and then the rest are kind of spread out. As a teacher, I might not worry about that. I know, because I was a teacher and I didn't worry about that, but I didn't know what I know now. But then the next year and the next year and the next year, now we see that this is a consistent pattern. And we only see that pattern if we have a record of it. And phone calls are not a record. It just doesn't work that way. Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
How do you tell a child that they have ADHD? I mean, it's so that it's not looked at as being a deficit, that it can be an asset in some ways, because he's 12, my son's 12, and so he looks at it as being a bad thing, and he's labeled, and there's something wrong with him.
How do you tell your kid they have ADHD? In this case, the son is 12. And it's obviously going to vary age to age. The younger the diagnosis, the easier it is to do it, right? Because it's like, you've got ADHD, and you're 6 or 7, and you don't know what that means anyway, so it's just kind of who you are, not a big deal. But once we get to 12, now that diagnosis matters. There are books that you can do. You can be like, here's a book about a character that has ADHD-like traits or actual ADHD traits. Rick Riordan, The Lightning Thief. Main character of The Lightning Thief has ADHD. And it's in the book. It's a part of his character. So that might be useful. Kid at 12, that's a book they might read. And it's a way to normalize ADHD, right?
Is there, in terms of brain science, is there a way to be able to explain it?
I get to use my slides.
Because I think that'll be helpful for him to see that it's
Yep.
it's just a part of his chemistry.
Suck it up, Buttercup. I'm with you. So, first, there's a bunch of brain stuff that we're going to do for a minute. First is dopamine. Dopamine is the brain's anticipation and reward chemical. By the way, if you want to take notes, feel free. But this one, all of the information I'm about to give you is right there, so feel free to take a picture with your phone. Because that's easier and ADHD friendly. So the ADHD brain, right, does not create as much dopamine as a neurotypical brain. And it doesn't utilize that dopamine efficiently. Dopamine, like I said, is the brain's anticipation and reward chemical. It's the thing that makes us want to do stuff. It's not the happy chemical. It's not the feel-good chemical. It's not the hope chemical. That's not what it is. Anticipation and reward. That reward is not always good. Best example of that is arguing. There is a ton of dopamine in arguing. Lights up the brain, but it doesn't make me feel good. Does that make sense? Anxiety can create dopamine too. Not a fan, not a fun experience. But ADHD and anxiety go hand in hand. In fact, if I were to give you a description from the DSM of ADHD and one of dopamine, most of you would be like, I don't know which one's which, because they're that similar. They're really not. They're actually very different. But in the DSM, they're that similar, because the DSM doesn't break the ADHD down in the same way that I am doing tonight. But so we have not as much dopamine, and we have poor usage of that dopamine in our brain. That's a brain difference. What that means is that I don't always do the thing I'm supposed to do. Because if I can personify my brain for a minute, sometimes my brain is like, I'm not wasting dopamine on that. That's not worth it. That is a really little thing. The example I typically use is the dishes, right? You know when you do the dishes and you get that like moment, you know that feeling of like, oh, the sink is empty. Oh, yay. I've never experienced that in my whole entire life. I don't know what that's like. So I don't do the dishes because there's nothing in it for me. When I was in college, I had 1 fork, 1 spoon, 1 knife, 1 plate, 1 bowl, 1 cup. Because I would wash them. And I knew that if I had 2 of them, I would think the other one is clean, and it would not be clean. So I only had 1, and it forced me to clean them. And then, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but when you get married, people like throw plates and knives and stuff at you. Not like in a violent way, but like they just give them to you. And now I have to do the dishes. But I'm not a fan. I don't typically get something out of that experience. Unless my wife sees me doing the dishes. And then I'm like, I get credit. She doesn't even say anything to me because my wife is not a cheerleader. She's very stoic. Very, very stoic. But if I know that she knows, then I'm like, she knows. And that's good enough for me. So dopamine is one component. It means that it's harder for us to get to where we need to go, right? You're driving a Prius to get to where you're going, and I am driving a Hummer. And my gas tank is only filled halfway. I'm not going as far as you go. I'm just not. I'm going to have to stop and refill. I'm going to often forget to fill it all the way up because it's a lot harder for me to get more dopamine. I have to do things like argue or play. Play is really great for creating dopamine. Or I have to take ADHD meds because most ADHD meds are targeting exactly that. They're targeting that dopaminergic cycle to increase the availability of dopamine in the brain. But there's no scenario where my brain gets more efficient, necessarily. Some ADHD meds help with that too. But for the most part, without ADHD meds, I'm not getting more efficient. Although I can get a little more depending on what I do behaviorally. Like exercise can increase dopamine. So that's one brain thing you can talk to him about. You know how don't always feel like doing stuff? That's because your brain doesn't make as much dopamine as mine does, or as someone else's does, and it doesn't utilize it that well. So you just have less fuel, and you burn out of it quicker. That's why your daughter comes home, she's fine all the way through school, and she's holding it together really, really tight at the end there, but she's holding it together, and then she gets home, and she's like, I have no dopamine. I need dopamine. Brawr! Right? She doesn't know she's doing it, obviously, but that's what's happening. There's no dopamine left. My executive functions are exhausted. So I melt down, or I forget to do stuff, or I'm just sort of a zombie. That's what's going on. More brain science, because that's why you guys came, right? Was for the brain science. The ADHD brain matures more slowly than a neurotypical brain. ADHD is not a behavioral disorder. It's a developmental disorder. The colored areas up here are where the cortex has peaked in thickness. So the more color, the darker it is, the thicker the cortex is, the more developed the brain is. Is this making sense? Up at the top is the ADHD brain. Down at the bottom is the typical brain. Like especially right here, look at that. Do you see the distinctions on those bottom 2 rows? That's crazy. Your son's brain is developing more slowly. He just is. There's nothing you can do about it.
Although he has the capacity to do well in school.
Sure he does. But then he's tapped out. And not in everything. And there are areas where he struggles. And you probably wonder why he's so immature sometimes. Yeah, see how that happened? Of course you do, because he is immature. His brain is not as mature as his peers. When I was 12, I was playing with G.I. Joe figures and Transformers, and it was awesome. And I had people coming up to me at McCarthy, "Who do you like?" And I was like, "Optimus Prime?" Like, what do you mean, who do I like? I got nothing. I don't know. I had no frame of reference for what that meant. But my peers were like, "Who do you like?" "Oh, you don't know her. She lives in a different town." Like, I didn't have any idea. And then when I was a freshman, I literally dated a girl from Lowell for 2 years. So figure that one out. But it just wasn't my jam. I was like, I don't know. Girls are not a thing I care about right now. Russell Barkley, one of the big gurus, he's like 2 tiers above me. And he's done a huge amount of the ADHD research that we have. He's spearheading that even still. He likes to say that we should estimate it as a 30% delay in terms of brain development, maturity, that kind of stuff. Not necessarily across the board. Some expectations your kid can do. Academically, he's doing okay. He's meeting those expectations, right? But maybe girls don't matter to him and he would rather hang out with Optimus Prime. I don't know, not Optimus Prime anymore because he's not cool like he used to be, but you know what I mean.
But he does much better with kids that are younger.
Yeah, because he connects to them better.
Yeah.
So that 30% delay is tricky conceptually because our years are a base 12 system because there's 12 months in a year. It's hard to break it down by 30%. But I did this on Monday. Let me see if I can remember my numbers. And I happened to use 12 when I did it because I had a lot of middle school teachers I was working with. 12 came out to 8.4. So like 8.5, which is not great. Like he's not acting like he's 8.5. That's not really what's going on. So the old rule, general rule that we were using was 1 to 3 years, a 1 to 3 year delay. And I always went with 2 because it's in the middle and it makes my life easier, right? 2 years matters. That's a big deal. If your kid is in 7th grade, but yours is in 6th, right?
No, he's in
7th, awesome. So if we drop him down 2 years, he's in 5th grade. But reframe his behavior as a 5th grader and see how much of it makes sense and fits now. I bet a good amount of it does. For a 7-year-old, a year is plenty.
I have a 5-year-old also, and they play really well together, and I just figured that's what probably like.
So ADHD is developmental. It's a developmental disorder. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have it. I'm 41. But when I say I'm young at heart, I'm young at brain too. Because mine stopped before yours did. People who are neurotypical, your brain keeps going and gets a little more because it's like you're 30 and it's like, I got to go this far. And my brain is 30 and it's like, oh, but I'm really 28. But I'm still done. Oops. As far as it goes.
But it starts developing at 25.
Yeah, I was just throwing numbers out. Yes.
Sorry.
So, like, in my case, 25, but I had, like, the brain of roughly a 23-year-old. Whereas someone who's 25 is 25. They've got more thickening of the prefrontal cortex, which is mostly what we're worrying about right now with ADHD, is that prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that makes careful decisions and planning and organization and all that kind of fun stuff. And yeah, not so great. The thing is, though, those are all skills that you can build. I know, because I've built them in me and in my clients. And do they fall apart sometimes? Yes. ADHD is nothing if not inconsistent. That's its whole entire job, is to be inconsistent. It's really frustrating. But you can build a lot of those skills. Thoughts, concerns, comments? Yep.
I have a question about medication. So I would say that from what I understand, the majority of our stimulants, like Concerta, Adderall, Strattera, raising levels of dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
How does Wellbutrin, I've seen that used for ADHD.
Yeah.
It's kind of more of an antidepressant, but.
And anti-anxiety too, a little bit. So that is a medication question that I'm not comfortable answering because I'm not a psychiatrist or a medical doctor or a pharmacist. And so my ceiling for medication is a little bit low intentionally because I don't want to think that I understand something that I'm not qualified to talk about and advise when I shouldn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Do you see Wellbutrin much in your children, your clients? Or?
not really. I know it happens, and it doesn't mean that it's not common. It just that means that my very small sample size, because I've worked with maybe 100 people over the past 6 years, that's not a big sample size relative to the population. And a lot of them were, no, I shouldn't say a lot of them, but a good number of them were not medicated because I'm a skills guy, and they're like, there are plenty of parents out there who are like, I don't want my kid to take meds. And there's a socioeconomic element to that where the more money you make, the less you want your kids to take meds. And the more money you make, the more likely you are to be able to afford my services. So that's a thing that happens. And also some of them are adults. And some of my adults are like, I'm on Wellbutrin because I suffer from depression and anxiety and ADHD. And my doctor was like, take this, it'll do all of it. But who knows what they're intending it to mainly attack. And even then, I think I've had maybe 1 or 2 clients. It's just not one that comes up a lot. That said, folks I've worked with who have depression, oh yeah. But when we start getting comorbid and stuff, it's less common. I get a lot of Concerta, I get a lot of Adderall. Really Concerta and Adderall. And Vyvanse is starting to come around suddenly in the past couple of years. Vyvanse is something I'm hearing more. Not even the past couple of years, but in the past year-ish. That's one I'm hearing more often. But yeah, that's like I said, that's a level of stuff I intentionally avoid so that I'm not advising and stepping out of my appropriate level of advising. I don't want to get out of my circle. I'll point you to other people instead. Anybody else? Should I just start rambling about something else instead? You guys, this is like $100 an hour. It's free questions. Just throw stuff at me. No one knows who you are. Well, maybe, I don't know. You guys could all be neighbors. You might all live on the same street. But everybody here is affected by ADHD in some way. So feel free to ask me whatever you want to ask me. And you know my ceiling is low for medication. But after that, other than that, we're doing okay. Yep.
I have another question. This is the more hyperactive child.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the arguing, he's in a very angry phase.
Mm-hmm.
Is that part of it, do you think? Is that
I love it when you ask me questions that I have slides for. That's what's going on. That's what's up with anger. Right? Anger is very rarely only anger. It can be, but often there's other stuff hiding underneath the anger. So the question was, my hyperactive kid gets angry. That's about as far as we got, and then I was like, I have a slide, and we lost the whole question. But am I going where you need me to go?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like I've had these questions before. I know what that one is. So anger is rarely only anger. Often there's something hiding underneath that anger. And it's important to point out that we're talking about a boy in this scenario, because ADHD does not exist in a vacuum. ADHD exists in our culture. No mental health disorders exist in a vacuum. They're all affected by the culture that surrounds them. Okay? And that matters. Because if I can just do a quick skip over to schizophrenia for a second, we'll come back to ADHD in a minute. But here's a cool thing about schizophrenia. In America, if you're hearing the voices of schizophrenia, they're often very aggressive and mean. But there are countries where people who are schizophrenic hear angelic voices and supportive voices and nice voices because their culture is different. So the voices in their heads are different because mental health disorders are affected by the culture that they exist within. Our culture, gentleman, and our videographer, I guess, men are not allowed to be vulnerable. Did you ladies know that? Did you know that we're not allowed to be vulnerable? That is not a thing we can do. Fear, rejection, humiliation, hurt, frustration, anxiety, negative emotions, they all have a component of vulnerability to them. All of them. Except anger. Anger makes me feel powerful. But I lied, because there's totally a vulnerability component to anger. My anger that makes me feel so powerful, the only reason it makes me feel powerful is because it makes you feel vulnerable. And I'm not being like misogynistic and being like men versus women stuff. It could be you. I could be yelling at my friend who is a guy. But it makes the other person feel vulnerable. So anger lets me pretend I'm not vulnerable. Makes you feel vulnerable, which makes me feel more powerful and less vulnerable. Yahoo. Is this making sense? It's complete and total nonsense. Happens to women too, but it happens to men and boys more often because we're not supposed to be vulnerable. Teach your kids it's okay to be vulnerable. I'm on a mission to be like, no, men are vulnerable. We are vulnerable all the time. We're vulnerable sometimes, often more so than women. But we're not allowed to be. So we have to swallow it and hide it and get all uncomfortable and disconnected from our emotions and all that kind of junk. And then we don't talk about stuff. We don't express our needs, and it's nonsense. But it's a thing that happens. And sometimes it comes out as anger. Yep.
We deal with a very low tolerance for a lot of those emotions, like particularly frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Like the minute something's frustrating, then she goes to anger or she goes to tantrum, whatever. Like, is that a part of ADHD? Is that specific to like her? Is that, do you have tips for that?
So low frustration tolerance is what we're looking at in a 7-year-old, but also in 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds and all around the horn. Totally an ADHD thing. Because that prefrontal cortex that I mentioned, right, which is where the executive functions live. One of our executive functions is emotional regulation. Frustration is an emotion. If I'm struggling to keep that in check, my emotions are going to go flying, right? Related to that is whatever it is you're asking me to do that is causing me to be frustrated, there's a bunch of other executive functions that are probably hiding inside of that is a piece of why I'm feeling frustrated. So that's things like organization, time awareness, planning and prioritizing, working memory. Working memory is really, really short-term memory, right? So like I'm doing something, I get interrupted, and I go right back into doing it, my working memory is fine. I'm doing something, I get interrupted, and then I'm like, right. And then I go back into doing it, my working memory's on the fritz. You guys, when you're tired, you've probably experienced that, right? That's where ADHD starts. Is that like, oh, right. We start there. Very rarely are we like, yeah, sure, and go right back to what we're doing. Usually it's like, meh. And if that does happen, it's because I wasn't really paying attention to what you said. Because I was trying to keep my thing that I was doing in my head. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I have no idea. And then I go right back into it. Those other executive functions, if they're not working as well, I'm more likely to be frustrated by what I'm doing. That's why writing can be such a battle, right? Because also fine motor control can come into ADHD a little bit too. So there's the fine motor control of writing. There's the what am I going to write? How do I spell this word? That's all memory stuff and planning stuff and prioritizing. And that's hard. And so all of that makes me frustrated. And now I'm not regulating that emotion, right? And then another executive function comes in, which is response inhibition, which is my ability to not do the thing that I want to do, the urge that I have, my ability to squash that. I mean, if I huck that pencil across the room and start screaming, I did not inhibit that response because I have executive functioning challenges, because I have ADHD. Executive functioning often gets talked about with relation to autism spectrum disorder, but it's totally an ADHD thing too. Huge for ADHD. Just the way it presents is different. But if anybody here is familiar with autism, you're like, yeah, those words all sound right, or ish. I might be using slightly different names for similar concepts, because there's a million different ways that we define executive functions at this point. But all of that is mixed up in this frustration. So what do we do about it? There's a bunch of different things you can do about it. Something that I do with my kids is I talk to them about how they're going to get frustrated. And I talk to them about how we have to learn how to navigate that. My kids are in soccer. They don't like it. And I don't care. Because I don't want them to learn how to play soccer. It'll be nice. I want them to learn how to be frustrated. I want them to learn how to fall down and get back up again. I want them to learn how to handle doing something that they don't enjoy long enough to get good at it. Because the fact is, they're going to have to. I mean, they're kids. Yeah, I want them to have fun. And secretly, they like soccer. They will just never, ever tell me that, but I've watched them play. I've seen the smiles on their faces. I know Gavin loves to run and would run all day if he could. It's just kicking the ball and running. That's tricky. And they struggle with the fact that none of their teammates understand how to spread out. Like, they all just circle around the ball. And my kids are like, why are they doing that? Like, that's dumb, because mine are twice exceptional too. And they're like, just, if we spread out, everything will be better. So my kids spread out. But that largely means they're not part of the game anymore, because they're in the right spot. But everyone else is around the ball, and then they get bored, and they're like, and then the ball rolls by. And they're like, what? Ah. Now the other team has it. It got better when they got to play defense, because then eventually the ball came and they got in the way, which was Gavin got hit in the face. Good. Funny kid story. This is nothing to do with ADHD, but you'll like it. So, identical twins, that part matters. So I talked to my boys about how I thought they'd be good on defense, because watching them play offense, the way they positioned themselves, I was like, you should play defense. Then they played defense. Gavin is like, the kid's coming with the ball towards the net. Gavin's right here. Kid kicks the ball. Bam! Right in the face. Ball goes flying. Gavin gets pulled, because if you get hit in the face, you're out of the game when you're 9, right? Pulls him out. Gavin comes out. I'm like, awesome, that was great. You were in the right spot. And he was like, but as soon as I started cheering him on, he was, oh yeah, totally great. So Gavin comes out. Nate goes in, right? 3 minutes later, same exact scenario. Same kid, same place, different kid, but they're identical twins. So it looks like it's the same kid. And the kid was like, and just didn't know what to do. And just went this way instead, and like away from the net, away from Nate. He's like, didn't I just hit you in the face? It's good stuff. Nothing to do with ADHD, but a fun story. So I'm trying to teach my kids how to navigate hard stuff, getting hit in the face with a soccer ball, right? Feeling frustrated. Be intentional about that. The reason that we're struggling is because of the frustration. It's not because you can't write. It's because you're struggling with getting frustrated. So we need to navigate that. I'm going to give you a heads up. Hey, later on, in like 20 minutes or at 5 o'clock or whatever's appropriate, we're going to do some writing. We're going to write for 15 minutes. Let them know in advance. See how that goes. With some kids, that works great because they get to process it and prepare themselves for it and then do it. For other kids, it's totally a bad plan because they have 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour to get anxious and freak out about it, and everything is worse when you finally start. You got to sort of feel your kid out depending on what's going to work for them. Often a heads up is a good plan. That heads up can mean that we do it consistently, right? Like we're doing writing for 15 minutes every day at 6 o'clock, or studying our math facts every day at 5:30, or every day after dinner, or whatever makes sense. So they have to handle this, right? Like, yeah, you're going to be anxious, but we're going to get through it. And then you're going to do it again, and you're going to survive it, and you're going to eventually find out that you can do this even though it makes you frustrated, even though it makes you anxious. Because what happens is if we avoid it, it gets harder to do it, and the frustration gets bigger, and the anxiety gets bigger, and it becomes insurmountable, and that's not what we want to do. We want to make our kids face their fears in a safe, supported way. Is this making sense? And have them do stuff that makes them anxious, like play soccer or play basketball or whatever, and point out to them, this isn't about you. Yes, I want you to have fun at soccer. Yes, I want you to learn how to dribble the ball. I want all that stuff. But the number one lesson I want you to learn is how to fall down and get back up again, is how to navigate feeling frustrated, is how to do something that's hard, because you're always going to have to do something that's hard. And if we don't teach our kids how to do that, we're doing them a disservice. Yeah?
Any tips for like working memory, kind of breaking through that? I tell my son, I am always throwing out, and I know I shouldn't, like 3 things, like hang up your backpack, empty your lunchbox, and then sit down and do your homework. And that's, so I know breaking down is probably a better approach, but when he's sitting and looking at something, I could be talking to the wall, he's not hearing me because he's looking at what's in front of him. I don't know, any tips on, do you know what I'm asking?
Yep, I got you. There's a lot in there, and I'm going to break it in at teeny tiny pieces. So started with working memory. What do I do with my kids' working memory? The example that was given was that you'll say, hang up your coat, put your lunchbox away, sit down and do your homework, right? So 3 things, and he's sort of not nailing all those 3 things, doesn't remember what it is. Maybe he doesn't do any of them. And then the other component of that was you said that he'll be sitting and doing something, and you'll talk to him, and he doesn't even know that you're talking, right? Almost none of that is working memory. Most of that is communication on your end, which is where it's breaking down. Here's what I mean. The not remembering those 3 things could be working memory. Or it could be that he never received the we'll edit that part out. Or it could be that he never received the message in the first place. Because communication is a lot like playing catch. If I throw a football to you and you catch it, great. Working memory is how long you hold that football, right? If you hold it long enough, it gets to short-term memory, and if you hold it even longer, it gets into long-term memory. And now it's your football, and you're keeping it. But if I throw a football to you and it sails over your head, there's no memory involved. It just, you didn't catch it. You never had ownership of that football. You never had ownership of that information. So if you're talking to your kid and you're like, hey, hang your coat up, put your lunch away, do your homework, but they're not paying attention, even if they're looking at you, then they're not receiving that information. And my guess is that's what's happening because you immediately started talking about how he's not paying attention. So that's my guess, is that that's what's happening. It could very well be that he's also not remembering stuff, but usually with 3 things, we get 1 of them if we've heard it. And so I'm going to start with the working memory, and I'm going to use specifically your example of hang up your coat, put away your lunch, sit down and do homework. The way to get your kid to do that is to systematize it. Every day when you get home, this is what happens. Hang up your coat, put your lunch away, start your homework. Which, by the way, not a plan. That should not be how it goes. That kid needs a break. That kid needs some time to sort of chill out and then do their homework. So hang your coat up, put your lunchbox away, eat a snack, then do homework. Something, right? But that sequence, maybe it's hang up your coat, put your lunch away, and put your homework on the kitchen table. Like, figure out what you need. You're not doing it yet, just get it out, right? That sequence can be a system. That's the expectation every single day. That's what you're doing. And now it gets out of memory, and it just becomes a habit. We want to turn as many things into habits as possible, because then it's not exhausting our executive functions. It's not taking up our memory. When's the last time you had to remember how to brush your teeth? You might need to remember to brush your teeth, but you probably didn't walk into the bathroom and go, where is my toothbrush? Where is the toothpaste? Now what do I do? Odds are slim that that's what happened, because it's a system. It's a habit. You know what happens. That's why moving is so stressful. Moving is stressful because all of our habits change, right? I really don't know where I put my toothbrush because it's a different bathroom, and it doesn't have a mirror that opens that lets me put my toothbrush behind it. What did I do with my toothbrush, right? So some of it is make a system for him. And how old is he?
8.
So son is 8 years old. Perfect. Great age to establish systems with. Old enough to understand it, not so old that they're going to think it's stupid. But even if they're old enough to think it's stupid, make them do it anyway. So the 12-year-old kid, totally systematized stuff. It's going to take a little while, but it'll work. And by a little while, I'm talking weeks, months. Years. Sure, years works. But here's the thing. If you're not consistent as the parent, it's going to take that much longer. Like, you have to stay on top of them until it gets systematized. And use external tools. You want to improve your working memory? Use technology. Buy an Alexa. I love Alexas. Love them. They're like magic. Magic. Because they talk to you. I can write stuff down on a piece of paper all day long. Right? Tomorrow is picture day. Make sure the kids wear nice shirts. Because tomorrow's picture day and I have to make sure my sons wear nice shirts. Not that we messed that up last year and have no pictures of them from 3rd grade. We totally don't have any pictures from 3rd grade. It's completely what happened. It's my fault entirely. But the note's not enough. I may or may not see that note. And geography matters for notes, right? If you're going to bed and you jot a note and you put it on your nightstand, why? You'll see that before you go to bed tomorrow, but if it had to do with getting your kids dressed well for picture day, that note is useless. Maybe writing it down reinforces in your memory, maybe, but that not so effective. On the other hand, taking that note and putting it on the refrigerator or sticking it in the cereal box or taping it to the door, now you might interact with that note in a way that is useful and see it. Is this making sense? But Alexa, Alexa, set a reminder. What's the reminder? Make sure the boys dress well for picture day. What time should I remind you? 7:45 a.m. Okay, I'll remind you. And then I wake up and take a shower, and I'm making lunch for my kids, and I hear, make sure the boys dress well for picture day. And I'm like, oh, guys. Boom. Lovely. Awesome. And the best thing about Alexa is that you're talking. So it takes no time. You're just blah, 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 blah. You don't need to have a pen. You don't need to have a piece of paper, right? And there's something cathartic about it too. Like when I can't fall asleep because I have a thought running through my head, oh man, I totally forgot to email that guy. Oh, I'm in so much trouble. And then I just go out in my kitchen and I'm like, Alexa, set a reminder. And I feel better.
Does she acknowledge that you've heard her, though? What if you're not there to hear her?
Then I'm not there to hear her.
So she doesn't acknowledge it.
Right, she has no idea if I'm there or not. So the question is, with regard to Alexa, what if you're not there to hear her? Does Alexa know that you're not there to hear? Alexa has no idea if I'm in the room or not. Alexa's just going to set this reminder off, which is why I have to be strategic about setting those reminders. Most of my reminders get set between 7 a.m. and 7:45 a.m. and really 7:30 and 7:45 a.m. because I could be in the shower anywhere between 6:30 and 7:30 depending on how that morning went, right? How tired I was the night before. I'm totally sleeping till 6:30 tomorrow because this is ending around 9 and then I have to drive home and I'm usually a little wired after these things. It takes me some time to fall asleep. There's no scenario where I get up at 6 like I want to. So 7:30 to 7:45, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be in the kitchen. I'm picking my reminder times in that way. I will set reminders for things I have to do at 3 o'clock, but I'll set them at 7:45 in the morning, and it'll just be another opportunity for me to set up a different reminder, right? So if I have to call somebody at 3 o'clock and I don't know that until right before I go to bed because I get a text message or something, I'll set the reminder for 7:45 so I don't have to worry about it anymore. It's 10 o'clock at night, I want to go to bed, I want this out of my head, so I give it to Alexa. I'm like, Alexa, hold this for me until 7:45 a.m. and then I'll figure out what to do with it. And then Alexa's like, this is your reminder, call Charlie at 3 p.m. And I'm like, oh, that's right, I have to call Charlie at 3 o'clock. Now I'm putting it in my calendar. Now I'm sending myself an email or doing whatever I need to do. But one of the things I'm trying to limit at night is my exposure to screens. Because screens emit blue light. Blue light triggers the body's alertness response and makes it harder to fall asleep. So there's no way I'm going to go into my calendar on my phone or my computer and start putting a phone call in for 3 o'clock tomorrow after roughly 8 o'clock at night, because I go to bed at 10. And I want 2 hours between screen time and bedtime. In my house, screen time ends at 6 p.m. because my kids go to bed at 8, and I want 2 hours between them going to bed and the end of screen time. Really, they go to bed at 8:30, but they used to go to bed at 8, and we just left screen time ending at 6:30 there. The exceptions being work, so productivity stuff. If I have to edit a podcast, if I've got clients, I run parent coaching groups. The last session of parent coaching groups that I ran ended at 6:30, so that's a half an hour after screen time anyway. Or no, it started at 6:30, sorry. So 6:30 to 7:30. That's work. If my kids have to do something online for work, for school, they're reviewing math facts on an app or something, then okay, that happens. We try to keep it earlier than that, but if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Maybe they had soccer practice, we're not home till 7, too bad for us. But avoid that blue light. Even TVs emit blue light, but I recognize that that's sort of how life works. But TVs are not as stimulating as tablets and laptops and phones. It's sort of the bottom tier of how much it's going to keep you up. Those other things are going to keep you up much longer. Is this making sense?
Oh, yeah.
I know I'm kind of going everywhere a little bit, but it's a Q&A and that's how it works. Yeah?
So what about electronics and ADHD? Because, yeah, he's addicted to electronics.
What about electronics and ADHD?
Or the addicting part.
He's addicted to it. So addiction, let's start with addiction, shall we? And then we'll go into electronics, is that okay? Because it'll help. I'm framing the electronic stuff a little bit. You know what the core of addiction is? Dopamine. You know what ADHD brains don't have enough of? Dopamine. Woohoo! That's why people with ADHD are more prone to addiction than people who don't have ADHD. Self-medicating, it's a thing. That dopamine element to addiction is also why we can get addicted to gambling, we can get addicted to shopping, we can get addicted to a screen, to electronics. That's dopamine. That's what that is. That's what you're addicted to. It's just coming in the form of Fortnite or whatever. Video games, apps, they bring in neuropsychologists now and neurologists. to make sure that that computer, whatever, is providing a constant stream of dopamine to the person using it to keep us addicted. Why do you think Facebook has likes? That's dopamine. That's what that is. Do you remember when like 4 likes was a big deal for you? And now you probably have to get like 35 of them to even start to care, right? And just when that started to happen to you, Facebook released hearts and angry faces, right? Laughing faces. And you were like, I got 4 laughs. I'm hilarious. And now you're like, 4 laughs? That was way funnier than that. How come now you need like 15 laughs to feel like it was worth it? Because we're starting to get past that one too, right? So what has Facebook done? Anybody type congratulations recently? And like the balloons go up and the confetti goes flying? Yeah. Facebook is like, I gotta get dopamine somewhere else. Type the word rad. It's like a rocket-propelled thumb that goes shooting up in the air. I don't think too many people use it. It might be gone by now, but a couple months ago that was happening at least. But that's what's up. They know. They're like, oh, this. Video games never challenge us to a level that we can't handle. It's never too easy. It's never too hard. If it's too easy, you get past that level. If it's too hard, you don't get to that level. It's always right in that sweet spot, or as much as you can do that, right? Even if it's a game like Call of Duty, where you can't really tell where the levels are, because it's just sort of a progressive thing, there's still levels in that. That's not the case for Fortnite, which I mentioned earlier, because it's a multiplayer game, and it's like sometimes there's kids who are playing, or people, because adults play it too, that are amazing, and they're way better than you are. And other times it's like a group of 8-year-olds, and you're 20, and you house everybody. But that's the risk of a multiplayer game, is it can kind of be, who knows. But at the same time, Fortnite makes up for that, because you die and you come back right back in, and there's no progress to be made. So it's not like you're losing progress. You just come in and play another game. It's the same thing. And you can practice your skills and all that kind of stuff and get better. But that's what's going on. That's a big chunk of it. And it's stimulating. And there's blue light. And all kinds of other things. That said, be careful with those screens. Particularly because who knows who's on the other end. Right? We don't know who our kids are talking to if we don't monitor those screens. We don't know what they're getting exposed to on the internet. My kids watch YouTube on the television. Like, we have a TV that can kind of go to YouTube, so they do that. And I don't let them watch YouTube channels that I'm not familiar with. Because a lot of it is like people playing video games. But there are white supremacists out there trying to groom kids by way of these YouTube channels. I'm like, guys, if I don't know what it is, no way. And as I left today, they were like, we're gonna watch this one. We've watched it a couple times, and it seems like it's okay. Is that all right? And just the content of it, I was like, I can see how this could go wrong and my kids wouldn't notice it. Because my kids are like, they're not swearing and that kind of stuff. That's what they're paying attention to. They're not paying attention to stuff that's like more subversive and sneaky. Because they're 9. They're not mature enough for that. So I got to guard against it. Yep.
So are you saying that kids that have ADHD, would you limit even more? With that video games and like that?
My kids are not diagnosed with ADHD. I have my suspicions, but I'm their dad, and it's a skill thing, so who knows. I don't care about ADHD, not ADHD. I think we need to be more careful with screen stuff. That said, we can't eliminate it because it's part of the social fabric of their reality. And if we want them to be able to relate to their peers, we have to let them play video games. We have to let them watch Dan TDM, which is totally a fine channel. I've watched enough of it. There's nothing wrong with Dan TDM. It's weird. I don't get it. I don't understand why you want to watch this dude play Minecraft all day. But he's not saying anything bad or subversive or harsh. He's just playing Minecraft and talking about his pugs. So we need to be more aware of what our kids are getting exposed to, and the fact that the internet is the wild, wild west. Who knows what's going on out there? So you just got to be mindful of it, which doesn't mean you don't expose your kids to it. It just means we have to be really careful. We have to set clear boundaries. We have to prepare them for what they might get exposed to. My kids wanted to play a game called Roblox. Have you heard about Roblox? Which has a social component to it. And for a long time, it was not well policed. They've since improved it. And I was like, okay, I'll let you try it. My kids tend to get into stuff and then stop pretty quickly. So I was like, they'll probably give this up without too long. 6 months later, they weren't really doing it anymore. But when we went into it, I was like, here are some words you need to know. And here is why they're terrible. And here is why it's not words we use. And here is why it's unacceptable. And I was not just going F-bombs. I was talking about the N-word. I was talking about the C-word. All of those horrible swears that you don't want to talk to your kids about when they're 8, 9 years old, we did. And it wasn't an enjoyable conversation, but it was an important one to have, because if they get exposed to it, I want them to hear about it from me first. And I don't want to not let them do this thing that all of their peers are doing and that has kind of cleaned itself up, because I'm afraid they might get exposed to this stuff without me seeing it. That said, there's also like, predators out there, and that's different. But we monitor that too.
The thing is understanding it.
Right. Google it. If you're like, I don't know what that means, Google it. Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about the social issues that these kids have? Because I know a lot of times they don't pick up on the social cues that their peers give them.
Mm-hmm.
They're just kind of the quirky kids sometimes that really doesn't get what's going on around them, and they don't care that they don't get what's
Right.
going on around them. So they kind of get isolated.
Social issues by way of ADHD, missing social cues. Also, maturity is in there. We often don't think of it, even though it's a very major component, right? Like me. Who do you like? I don't know. I was socially isolated, especially in middle school, because I didn't relate to stuff the same way other people did. So we can teach our kids social cues. Often we don't, but we can. That's a thing. Michelle Garcia Winner has a program called Social Thinking. It's aimed more at folks on the autism spectrum, but that doesn't mean we can't bring that in and use it if we need to, because often as parents we don't really know how to explain that stuff, and social thinking can walk you through how to explain that stuff. But a lot of the time it's just sort of paying attention to what you're seeing your kid do and then talking to them about it. And not in a, you should have done this, but like, hey, how'd that go? You seem like you're having a little bit of conflict with Fred. What was up with that? What was going on? Well, Fred, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, let's address that, right? Or like some kids, when they want to enter a group, right, feel like they have to make a big splash. And ADHD kids with the impulsivity can do this, right? They kind of go into the group and they're like, they hear someone mention Disney World and they're like, I went to Disney World and blah, 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 blah. And all the other kids are like, who are you? What the heck is going on? The way to enter a group is to stand on the outside of it for a little while. Just kind of be there. And then everyone kind of gets used to you. And then you say something, back, kind of come back out again, right? Or get the invitation in. If they've got a friend in that group, but no one else knows them, sometimes you can talk to that kid. Hey, can you help my kid kind of talk to all the other kids at soccer? Or you can say to your kid, hey, just go talk to Fred when he's talking to the group. Just go ask him a question or go say hi to him. And then that'll circle up, right? You can talk to them about physical positioning and body language. If everyone's standing in a circle, like this is a good one, even for adults. Have you ever been at like a mixer and there's people standing in a circle, right? And you're like, I would just like to join your circle, but everyone has their back to me. Do you know what I mean? And I know 3 of you, but I don't know what to do. If you just lightly touch someone on the shoulder, like 2 fingers, they're gonna go, oh, hey. And then you're like, whoop, and you go. And if 2 people hit them both, and then they'll both go, dunk. They're like, hey, oh, they open up, and you're like, yoink, how's it going, guys? And then you're in the circle. And kids can do that too. But that's not something we teach them. I'm assuming most of you would never heard of that strategy before. And you're adults. But we can teach kids these little skills and these little tricks. You can find them on the internet. And now they have a stepping stool. Now they have somewhere to go. Talk to kids about how they need to have stuff in common with other kids. That's where video games come in. My kids don't like Fortnite. They just don't. And they felt so excluded for all of summer camp. And they were in 3 different summer camps. But in all of them, it was Fortnite, 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 Fortnite. And my kids were like, we don't like Fortnite. So eventually they were going to the summer camps and I was like, Nate, that's why no one is hanging out with you. Smile, homie. Like, dude, you're coming in with a sourpuss and you're all slouched over. Like, nobody wants to talk to you. Because you look like you don't want to talk to anybody. Roll in looking like you're having a good day and you might want to talk to somebody. And then people will talk to you. And it worked. The one time he did it. But those are the kinds of strategies and skills that we have to give kids with ADHD. We have to be a little more transparent. And that's not just socially, that's with everything. You want your kid to know how to do the laundry? Teach them how to do the laundry over and over and over again. Don't teach them twice and assume they know. It's not going to work. You got to teach them again and again and again and again and again and again and again until you want to vomit. And they do too. And then see if it works. Your hand sort of fluttered a little while ago, and I didn't know if it was because, yeah, you. You also had a bottle of water, and I didn't know if you were like thinking about raising your hand, or if you were just sort of fiddling with the cap on the water. Nothing?
I was fiddling.
Okay, that's fair. No pressure. Yeah?
What if your kid doesn't have the patience to be taught? Like, they have to do it themselves, they're just not going to listen, then you get frustrated because they don't want to listen.
What if your kid doesn't have the patience to be taught? What if they have to do it by themselves and do it their way, and they just don't want to listen? That question always gives me more information than the person asking it wants me to have. Here's the deal. Kids need to have control over stuff, right? Over their decisions, over their choices and stuff. They need to have validation. They need to have acceptance. Kids who are really motivated by control come from parents who really need to have control. It's like, I hate this guy, but he's so good. That is a thing. And it always causes conflict. Because mom or dad, it could be dad, I don't know. But one parent needs to be in control. Kid is just like that parent. Kid needs control. It doesn't take long for those heads to bang. Is this making sense? If that's the case, oh my God, give your kid control. You get more control by giving them control. Seems counterintuitive, but it's the way it goes. So if they need to figure it out on their own, let them. Here's the deal. You need to do your laundry, for example. Pull all of the red stuff out of their laundry. Just get it out. You do the red stuff. But you need to do your laundry. You have told me that you're going to do it. How are you going to figure it out? How? How are you going to do it? I'm not going to do anything for you. I just want to know what the plan is. You make the plan, but tell me the plan, and then I'll say go do it, or I might say you're missing something. But I'm not going to tell you. I'm not even going to tell you what it is. I'll just tell you if you're missing something. It's on you, homie. You need the control. You need to be able to do the thing. I'll let you do the thing, but I want some check-ins before you execute on the plan. Does that make sense? That's a way to navigate that. I'm letting go of control. I'm giving it to my kid. And eventually, what's going to happen is this kid's going to get more and more agency. They're going to get more and more independence. And you're going to be like, I don't know. I mean, I guess you can build a deck. Feel free. Because they're going to have figured so many things out that you're going to be like, I got this. So doing that is useful, right? Sort of giving the kids some control, but always around how are you going to do it? What's the plan? Because you want to build skills. That's what we want to do. So to the level that is appropriate, have them figure it out. Stop telling them how to do stuff, especially at 12. At 12, you're like, I don't know. Mom, I don't know what my homework is. Okay. How are you going to figure that out? What do you mean? Figure it out. But aren't you going to just tell me what I should do? Nope. You already know. There's like 3 or 4 choices, right? Go to the website, look at your agenda, call a friend, email your teacher. That's about all the choices. Related to that whole notion of like counterintuitive stuff, I like to give permission to the people that I work with who have ADHD, especially the parents. So I'm going to give some permission right now. If you are parenting through fear, if fear dominates your parenting, it's okay to let that go. And I don't mean that you yell at your kids and try to make them live in fear. That's not, I mean, maybe you might be doing that, but that's not necessarily what I mean. I mean, it's not uncommon for us to make parenting choices because we feel the social pressure around us of like how you're supposed to do it. Is anybody familiar with this pressure and how much it is terrible and awful and I hate it? Have any of you had the experience of being in your house and it's just you and your kid, and realistically you would do this a different way, but you make the choice that you feel society pressure about, even though no one will know what you did? Anybody have that? Like when you're, sit down and do your homework, brawr, because you feel like you have to be the strict parent, even though what you really want to do is sit down next to them and be like, hey, how about if I read a book and you do your homework and we'll just kind of hang out and have like a nice little powwow moment? You hear what I'm saying? Right? Yeah. Just let that go. Trade fear for respect. Giving your kid leeway, giving your kid choices, giving them the freedom to make the plan, letting them occasionally not do the homework, or letting them occasionally not make their bed, even though the world would be so disappointed if he didn't make his bed. But that's because that's the more reasonable choice today, because it's a horrible day and your kid threw up or whatever, like, or they're just having a bad morning and you're like, you know what, don't worry about the bed today. Tomorrow you're making your bed, but today, whatever. It's okay to make those choices and to pick your battles and to lose some, because often, I'm not even saying sometimes, I'm saying often we can strategically lose battles and gain respect. We can gain our kids' respect by losing battles. That is a thing that can happen. But often we stick to the like, no, I am the parent. Right? I need to have that power. I need to have that control because honestly, I feel like I'm supposed to, because that's like what society seems to think that I should do. So I feel like that's what I should do. Forget it. Not a plan. Respect beats fear every day. It takes longer. Well, not every day, but eventually, right? Like you get more out of respect, your kids' respect, than your kids' fear. So play with that idea in your head and see if it's useful. Yes?
Can you talk about relationships, like extended family relationships?
Yeah.
Like grandparents who maybe don't understand ADHD or who think that they know how to handle the situation.
Extended family who think they know better, who think they understand ADHD but don't, specifically grandparents in this case. Yeah, absolutely. That trading fear for respect thing, totally my in-laws versus me. My in-laws are like strict New York Jewish folks, interfaith marriage. Totally the like, there are expectations, you will live up to the expectations, that's the way it goes. Sit at the dinner table, eat dinner, even though you're 4, you know what I mean? And that is not how I roll. I was like, no, go wander, like you're 4. But, I mean, you're 7, yeah, sit at the table. But if it's Passover and this is like a 3-hour meal, bounce, come back. You know what I mean? And by the time they were 7 and that was happening, my in-laws knew. They were like, yeah, bounce, come back. Because I sort of trained my in-laws a little bit. But at first, I could tell from the looks on their faces, from sort of the vibe, that they thought I was the worst parent in the whole wide world. Because my approach was totally different. And my approach was based entirely in reasonable expectations for their ages and respect. And fear never entered into it. Fear came in very, very rarely, and it was usually because of a safety thing. And this is a safety issue, but you have no concept of it. So I need to make you afraid of that, like you're gonna go put your hand on a hot stove. And I can either yell at you and terrify you, or you can burn your hand off. That was where fear became a thing. Other than that, it was whatever, we'll be fine. Now, my relationship with my in-laws is very different, but I had to play the long game. And I thought I was gonna lose them. I was like, my in-laws are never gonna think that their daughter made a good choice. They're just not. But now, I mean, I am a recognized parenting and ADHD expert, so I'm doing something right. And it's a long game. And teaching them about ADHD, you got to talk about how it's not a behavior issue, it's a developmental disorder. You've got to give them resources that, you know what, I'm going to show you something. This is the book that I always recommend for people who want to learn about ADHD. The new version is The Survival Guide for Kids with ADHD. So that part goes away because the name of it changed in the DSM, the Psychology Diagnostic Manual. It's for kids. Look at that, right? Anytime I want to learn something new, I start with a kid's book. Because it's easier to read, it gives me a good foundation, and then I can read the complicated scholarly stuff later and build on the foundation I've already established with a kid's book. This is the way to go. See how thick that bad boy is? John F. Taylor, PhD. This is like a day, maybe 2. It's not a long read, but it'll get you the gist of it. Alternatively, you can hire me and I can hook you up in 2 hours. I can get you done, ready to go in 2 hours, including bringing and when I do that, I'm like bringing everybody. I once sat in a living room with 12 people and did like a mini workshop because they brought all of the people from their family in-laws and grandparents and cousins, and it was a little intense. But start with something like that. Listen to podcasts so they can get a vibe of it. And podcasts are going to have potentially people telling their real stories about ADHD, which puts a face on it, other than you. Huh? To the podcasts? My kids are on one of my episodes because I interviewed Dave Pilkey, the author of Captain Underpants. So they're on that episode because they happened to be home that day. School had a PD, professional development. And but they're not going to be that excited by my podcast because it's not aimed at kids. But in-laws or grandparents or something totally can listen to podcasts and get an idea of what ADHD is like.
In particular, they cannot handle the tantrums that explode.
Of course not.
And their solutions just because they're
Uh-huh. So let me talk about tantrums. I have enough time, sort of. When a kid has a tantrum, it's because they're emotionally dysregulated, right? Their emotions are all over the place. Remember, ADHD and emotional regulation, not so great. We struggle with that. But here's the thing. When a kid has a tantrum and becomes emotionally dysregulated, potentially so do the adults around the kid. Because it's overwhelming, because of mirror neurons that want to duplicate the behavior of the person you're with, all that stuff, right? And that leads to poor responses. So the way I would try to navigate that is I would try to limit the tantrums around my in-laws, because my kid's going to grow out of that. Eventually, that's not going to be a thing. I'm going to try to control the environment as much as I can so my kid is less likely to have a tantrum. Also recognize that emotional dysregulation is emotional dysregulation. I don't care what the emotion is. The best example of that is your drunk friend. You know your drunk friend who's like, oh, there's so much, man. I'm so happy you're here. That guy's looking at me. Kick that guy's butt, man. I can't believe he's looking at me. I don't know why I just did that. I'm so sorry. You know that guy? Or woman, could go either way. I'm a dude, so it was a dude when I did it. That was like happy and loving to angry to sad, which seems like a really big swing, but it's not. Because that was emotionally dysregulated to emotionally dysregulated to emotionally dysregulated. I don't care what emotion boils to the surface while it's not under control. Is this making sense? So your daughter is at the grandparents' house, super excited and off the walls running around, and then 30 minutes later, 5 minutes later, has a tantrum because your mother-in-law steps in at the wrong time. Kid's like, yeah, woo, running like got the truck along the wall or whatever. And she's like, put the truck on the ground. A little too stern, a little too strict, because she's getting emotionally dysregulated from seeing her walls get tire marks on them. Put that down. Kid goes from happy dysregulated to tantrum dysregulated. And that's all. So when your kid is doing that, right? Okay, buddy, come here. We gotta slow down. And you do that with nonverbals, right? Hey, stop doing that! Does not help. It just escalates it. But hey, buddy, come here. No, come here. Now. See how all I did? I start, I'm like loose, and then I get solid. Now. My posture changes, my voice drops an octave, and I don't move. That kid is coming to me. And if the kid doesn't come to me, I might go. But my pivot foot is planted, right? Kid comes over, and then I come down to their level. Sorry, camera. I come down to their level, and I'm like, hey, buddy, like you gotta slow down. You gotta chill. You're gonna leave tire marks on the wall, and that is not a plan. What do you think grandma's gonna do if she sees tire marks on her wall? She's gonna get really mad. Yeah, do we want that? No. All right, so what are we gonna do? Well, I'll use it on the floor. Awesome. Or I'll use it, or you could even go outside and drive your truck on the trees. That's fine. Not in the house, on the trees. That's okay. Maybe on the fence works, I don't know. But like you can give them alternatives, but drop your energy level, drop your emotional intensity, because mirror neurons, your kid's gonna mirror your level of intensity. If you're like, what are you doing? Your kid's escalating. Not a plan. You have to co-regulate them. You regulate yourself, that will help them regulate themselves. Is this making sense? And there's a lot more to that I don't have time to go into. But that's a way to help your kid calm down.
Do you think that there's a correlation between the food and ADHD? Because that's been a big thing.
I defer to science. We have not yet found that is a thing. At least not any reliable studies. You can find all kinds of like studies on websites that end in a Z that pretend that they have something, but those studies are nonsense. We haven't really found anything. There's one food dye that is like a maybe, but it's not confirmed. That said, we do know simple carbohydrates are a bad plan. Spike your blood sugar, leave you with fog brain, make your ADHD symptoms worse. Just so happens, a lot of the stuff people say you should avoid are full of sugar and simple carbohydrates. So if you avoid those things, your ADHD symptoms get better. Does that mean that it was food dye, or does it mean that you were eating too many simple carbs? I defer to simple carbs. If you increase the amount of fruits and vegetables you're eating, it's going to be better. And eat more protein. People with ADHD need more protein. We also need more, it's not there. Omegas, thank you. We need more omega-3s. There's a specific kind that I'm not going to pretend I can come up with because I just blanked on omegas. It's a little late. It's been a long day. But Even the science with omegas is a little meh as to whether or not they're working or not. But a lot of that is like different vitamins and how effective they are and that kind of stuff, and trying to get a reliable study in. So the science isn't quite there yet, but that doesn't mean it's not going to get there eventually. So I don't rule it out. I'm just not going to be like, yes, it's the devil. Like red 40 is the worst thing ever.
Parents are saying the kids can't have sugar, no, definitely no sugar.
Simple carb. Simple carb. And you know what? If I go up to a kid, if I come up to him, this guy right here, and I'm like, hey, if you eat sugar, you're going to go crazy. You're going to be off the walls all the time. You know what he's going to do? Awesome. I want to be off the walls all the time. So every time I eat sugar, I get to be off the walls all the time. You know what I mean? Like, of course they're off the walls. You just gave them permission. You didn't mean to, but that's totally what you did. Whereas kids who don't get that message, they eat sugar and they're like, whatever. Yummy sugar. And then someone over here had a question.
I was just thinking like ADHD and discipline.
Uh-huh.
What's most effective?
ADHD and discipline, what's the most effective? Pull, don't push. What I mean by that is bring them towards the behavior you want. Don't try to chase them away from the behavior you don't want. Does that make sense? Kid is running in the hall. If I say, don't run, that kid hears run. I don't know what that other word was, because they're trying to process the negative, right? If I say walk, they're like, oh man, and then they walk, because they don't have to process the negative to get out of there, right? Anything I draw your attention to, you're going to naturally sort of go towards. So we don't want to say, hey, stop hitting your sister. Okay. Hands to yourself is a little bit more effective. Does that make sense? When it comes to yelling, and this is just my soapbox, maybe none of you yell. I don't know. But here's the deal. Yelling is the nuclear, unless you're willing to hit your kids, which I'm assuming you're not, yelling is the nuclear option. Don't yell. Find stuff before yelling. You want to have like 5 to 10 strategies that come before yelling. Because eventually your kid's like, whatever. I don't care that you're yelling. You yell all the time. So you want to do that. Anybody else? This was a very kid-oriented one. Any adults have any stuff that they wanted me to ask me? No? Oh, that's okay. I know that the library is going to be upset if I'm not packed up and out of here at 9, and I know I need a few minutes to do that. That said, before you all bounce, I can pack up and answer questions if there's stuff you didn't want to ask in front of the group. And it is my tradition that I stay outside in the parking lot for as long as people want me to, and I talk to people individually as necessary. If the question is too long, I might be like, you need to email me or you need to pay me, depending on how complicated it is. And then, and if the line is long, it's like quicker and quicker, and you know what I mean? So if there's 3 people out there, that's one thing. If there's 17, the answers are faster. So have a good evening. Again, there's a clipboard around somewhere. Flyers and cards are back there if you want them. Listen to my podcast, ADHD Essentials. Learn about Dave Pilkey and how he had ADHD and dyslexia and how it helped him create Dog Man and Captain Underpants.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you very much.